This episode of Doc Talk is brought to you by the Kappa Boot Scootin' Ball, featuring the president of the Redneck Yacht Club himself, Craig Morgan.
Trackers, bayliners, and a party ball.
Join us Friday, April 5th for the Knoxville's most talked about fundraiser of the year. The event will be packed with great country music provided by Craig Morgan, line dancing, Western-themed dinner, bottomless beverage, and an exclusive Kappa Boot Scootin' Ball souvenir mug. Additionally, a silent auction valued at more than $40,000 will give the opportunity for those in attendance to bid on some packages, including a Dynasty Spa. For tickets, visit KappaBootScootin.com.
Hi, welcome to Doc Talks. Doc Talks is the Knoxville Academy of Medicine podcast where we talk about health issues in plain language. I'm Elise Denneny, former president of the Knoxville Academy of Medicine. And joining us today is Dr. Clifton Tennison, who is a psychiatrist who has been practicing for many years, although he doesn't look that old. He's done much of the community consultation for the field of psychiatry, and now works as a consultant for psychiatry in the UT Sports Medicine Division. Our topic today is mindfulness. It's a very recent topic, and I'm sure we're going to learn a lot, including myself. Welcome, Dr. Tennison. It's so nice for you to join us today.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
So teach us, what is mindfulness?
Mindfulness is a way to practice paying attention. And what we know about it is very old, actually. It's sort of become mainstream in the media these days, both the social media and in medical papers and research projects. But it's probably 5,000 to 10,000 years old. It goes back to indigenous populations all around the world, pre-literate cultures, and then starting about 2,500 years ago in ancient philosophies, ancient psychologies, the ancient Greeks and Romans, the people in Indochina, China and Japan and Korea, and in India, the Buddhists and many others.
That's starting to resonate.
Yeah.
So why is paying attention so healthy?
Well, it's healthy because, my goodness, how long do we have? It's healthy because it helps us retrain ourselves from the kinds of default, habitual, and often maladaptive mental habits that we have, to be able to see, oh, I'm not trapped. I can change my mental habits. And we'll always have mental habits. We're creatures of habit. But they don't have to be maladaptive and dangerous and uncomfortable and unhealthy.
So so if I was in a situation which I thought was dangerous or negative, unenjoyable, something I didn't want to be in, I would adapt a certain behavior or a certain response. When you say maladaptive, meaning that's not necessarily healthy for me. And so this is a way I can break that cycle.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's been known, as I said, for centuries, for millennia. Most religious traditions have mindfulness components to them, different kinds of prayer, centering prayer. And for many, many years, we've talked about exactly what you're talking about in metaphorical terms, because we didn't have the neuroscience to show how it's actually occurring in the physical central nervous system. How is this actually happening in the brain? And now, over the past 30 or 40 years, we do have some data. It's very early data. 30 to 40 years isn't very long to study something that's been around for 3,000 years. So, but we do have some data now where now we have a mixture, and I wanted your listeners to be able to appreciate this, where a lot of the things that we talk about, we still use sort of poetic, spiritual tradition, metaphorical language to describe. in behavioral terms about how we feel, how we act, or what we do, because we don't have the complete brain science to really, and we don't want to exaggerate what we know, because it's still very primitive, what we know in science. But what we know in science is remarkable so far, even though it's only about 30 or 40 or 50 years old. So yes, we can change our habitual responses to stressful reactions by learning how to look right at what's uncomfortable instead of avoiding it or pretending it's not there.
Oh, that sounds weird.
Well, it does sound weird, but it's no different from therapy.
Okay.
That's exactly what we do in psychotherapy.
Okay.
We help people turn toward what's difficult in their life instead of pretending there's no difficulty or knowing there's a difficulty and avoiding it, dealing with it. And so you can do that on your own.
This is something I can do myself.
And that's why mindfulness practices are important. The other answer to what is mindfulness goes like this. There are only 4 goals of mindfulness. And all the other wonderful things that can happen because of becoming more mindful are just byproducts. They're wonderful byproducts, and they will happen when you practice it over a longer period of time. It's got to be at least 8 weeks, and maybe even longer according to our current data. But the 4 goals are simple. Pay attention on purpose in the present moment with acceptance. And if you want me to go into those briefly, I can.
That would be great.
Okay.
Okay. I'll even be a guinea pig if you need.
Paying attention means turning toward what's difficult.
Okay.
Or turning toward what's wonderful. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of different mindfulness practices that have been developed over the centuries. But all of them use these as the goals of meditation or other mindfulness techniques. So there's sitting meditation, quietly, just you yourself in stillness. There's sport. The guys on the scrimmage line and waiting for the ball to be snapped aren't thinking about yesterday or what they have to do tomorrow. They're in the zone. That's one of the things I enjoy about working with athletes is they get it. They know what I'm talking about when I talk about mindfulness. Now, they don't necessarily like to sit in meditation, but you can use, but a mindfulness practice can be athletic. This morning when I got in my 4 mile run, which has become my morning meditation, and my evening meditation is a sitting meditation.
So you can be mindful doing a physical activity.
Absolutely. Yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, athletics, swimming, jogging, walking, listening to birds, walking, hiking. And so what it is pay attention on purpose because it's a practice. It's not something you just bump into and, oh, well, maybe I'll do this. You need to do it on purpose. And your practice is different from your everyday life. Just like athletic practice is different from the actual game. And so you do it on purpose. And by paying attention, I mean you really focus. You choose a focus, you stick with the focus with all of your intention, and yet, inevitably, a thought will interfere. The brain is an organ that secretes thoughts. It's a thinking machine and there's no off button. And many people will say, oh, I can't meditate. I can't do this mindful. I can't even do mindful walking or mindful hiking or mindful swimming because I can't stop thinking. The paying attention is not to stop thinking. Nobody can stop thinking. Nobody ever has, nobody ever will. And thank goodness we're able to think. So what it is to watch the thinking, to see the thinking interfere with the initial focus, accept it for what it is without judgment. You don't approve of it, you don't disapprove of it, it's just there. The thought is there. And then you let it go and return to the focus. And we call that a mindfulness cycle. You start with a focus, whatever it is. It might be your breath, just watching your breath go in and out. It might be other sensations in your body. It might be open monitoring of just looking at the clouds and listening to the birds, but you're focusing. And then a thought or an emotion interferes, or a physical sensation like pain. In fact, the earliest westernized studies back in the late 80s that developed mindfulness-based stress reduction were done up in Boston, Massachusetts, to deal with chronic pain, not with mental disorders. And so now in Western life, we've started off with this chronic pain thing, and now we've gone into having data to show that it's good for depression, anxiety, PTSD, childhood disorders, adult disorders. They're using it in the military, in psychiatry, and in general medicine. And it all goes back to this paying attention. So you pay attention, you focus, something interrupts it, you just notice the interruption and turn your attention toward that, accept it for what it is. There it is. I've thought that 1,000,000 times before. Let it go and return to the focus. And every time you close that cycle of paying attention, it's one more rep in the brain gym.
Right, so it's just like, the first time you try to go run a mile, that's not going to happen because the heart goes no, my muscles go no. And it's the same with the brain. So you're saying that we practice mindfulness and over time we get better at it.
Absolutely. And I'm lucky enough to have discovered this in 1971. So I've been doing it ever since. And I'm not great. I'm not perfect. Nobody's ever perfect. We always have to remember to be mindful. We always have to go back to it with a sense of a beginner's mind. Like, wow, I need to be genuinely curious and genuinely friendly toward myself and start all over again every time.
So can mindfulness treat, we live in such a fast-paced, technology-driven, high stress, not necessarily, but generally, high stress society. Can mindfulness be a treatment for that stress instead of taking anti-anxiety medicine maybe?
That's one of the best things about mindfulness, yes, is the realization that all stressful things, whether they're positive or negative, are impermanent. And the longer you meditate, or the longer you use mindfulness practices, the more that starts making sense to you. And the value and the gift and the grace of things being impermanent, you become grateful for, thank goodness. And so you start having to give up these ideas that who I am and what I'm about and circumstances are permanent and they're horrible and there's no escape. Well, yes, there is. And we can change. And that is really important for what you just said about dealing with stress. Resilience has been a major finding for the research done in mindfulness practices. Recovery from stress, just like we're awake and then we're asleep, we're awake and we're asleep. There's stress, there's recovery, there's stress, there's recovery. We do that with muscles. We stress them in the gym, but we have to let them recover. And then you stress them again and you recover, and then you end up building bigger muscles. Same thing happens here. There's stress, but we have to know how to recover or we won't be resilient. And so the mindfulness helps us recover.
That's amazing. How do we learn? Baby steps. So we know the value of mindfulness. If we want to implement mindfulness, I think that probably initially it's kind of hard to do it on your own. So maybe a coach is a good idea.
There are lots of trainers.
Okay.
There are lots of meditation and other mindfulness groups. There's lots of yoga practices out there, and Tai Chi and Qigong and some of these other things. Feldenkrais is another way to get in touch with your body, get out of your head and into your body. We don't pay enough attention to our body. We pay more attention to our thoughts, and yet our thoughts are less trustworthy than our bodies. Our thoughts are about 35 to 65% inaccurate all the time because they're based on the egoic mind, and there's a metaphor, the part of our thinking that wants us just to survive and nothing else, and yet we know there's more to us than that. There's empathy, and there's love, and there's kindness, and so we know there's more than just survival. But most of the thoughts are geared toward survival, and so we need to be able to see them clearly and not necessarily believe every thought that we have. Just notice them and see what they're about, and then make a reasoned choice about what to do next.
It's just amazing, I mean, so we're just scratching the actual surface of a topic that has great potential for every human individual to understand themselves and understand their bodies. It does take practice, and I'm so glad that Dr. Clifton Tennison was with us today so that we could start learning about mindfulness. I get excited when I think about treatment options for emotions that cause physical manifestations of poor health and ways that we can help ourselves. Hopefully we'll have maybe a few more podcasts on this so that we can tell us more about mindfulness. If patients or if anybody watching this podcast would like to know more about mindfulness, do you have a place where you recommend that they start?
We're making more and more efforts to teach primary care providers about this. And I've been doing this recently. It's sort of a passion in my semi-retirement. And so it's fun to go out, and I've been talking to internists and psychiatrists and family physicians and nurse practitioners and physician assistants and all sorts of folks about these sorts of things. So talk to your primary care physician first.
Okay.
And these folks know what's going on. It's in the medical literature. In the past 30 to 40 years, we now have about between 4,000 and 5,000 articles in peer-reviewed journals, and about 400 to 500 of those are high-quality, well-powered, randomly controlled trials. That's interesting for some people. But talk to your doctor about it.
Okay, so there you have it. I mean, understanding your health and understanding treatments for your best health sometimes really just runs right up the road towards mindfulness. And it's something I hope that you will look into and we wish you good health going forward. So that's a wrap for today, and we hope you'll join us in the future.
This episode of Doc Talk is brought to you by the Kappa Boot Scootin' Ball, featuring the president of the Redneck Yacht Club himself, Craig Morgan.
Fast trackers, bayliners, and a party ball.
Join us Friday, April 5th for the Knoxville's most talked about fundraiser of the year. The event will be packed with great country music provided by Craig Morgan, line dancing, Western-themed dinner, bottomless beverage, and an exclusive Kappa Boot Scootin' Ball souvenir mug. Additionally, a silent auction valued at more than $40,000 will give the opportunity for those in attendance to bid on some packages, including a Dynasty Spa. For tickets, visit kappabootscootin.com.